don't know which is worse, working at McDonald's for money or watching my little sister for free. On one hand, I have customers screaming at me because our ice cream machine is broken again. And on the other, I have my sister screaming at me, period. Can you decide? One day, when I was forced to watch the little brat, I decided to take her to Walmart. And let me tell you, little brat was an understatement. She dragged me down every aisle I absolutely hated, whining and crying, "Kayla, buy me a Kinder Joy, Kayla!" That's when Kayla snapped. I turned to the bratty little monster and said, "Lucy, shut up. I am not buying you a stupid Kinder Joy. Leave me alone and get lost." I turned back to the sparkly pens and waited for her to whine some more. But when I looked over my shoulder again, she wasn't there. My heart and stomach fell. The little girl that was my responsibility was gone, and I immediately assumed that the only place I'd ever see her again was on the Walmart Missing Children's board. Luckily for me, she had just gone down a few aisles to look at the Pop-Its in the toy section. Luckily for me, I got to take that breath of relief. Unfortunately, a lot of other people don't get to take that breath. Nearly 540,000 people go missing every year. A missing person is defined by the Association of Chief Police Officers as anyone whose whereabouts is unknown, whatever the circumstance of disappearance. They will be considered missing until located and their well-being or otherwise established. So today, we will first take a look at the timeline of how missing persons have been portrayed throughout history. Then, we will discuss the disproportionate attention given to those missing persons cases before finally uncovering why that disproportionality exists. Now, obviously, people have been going missing since the beginning of time, but the documentation and procedures surrounding their disappearances have gotten greatly more complex as media and technology have evolved. For example, as you may know, back in the late 1970s and 80s, children used to be put on the backs of milk cartons. One of the first children to be put on the back of a milk carton was 6-year-old Etan Patz, a little boy who went missing on his way to the bus stop in 1979. His case in the milk carton shaped the way law enforcement shared information with the public, and his date of disappearance was actually designated National Missing Children's Day. However, even though the milk cartons did have somewhat of an impact, there are reasons to believe that they didn't actually work. The first reason was because they were deemed emotionally harmful to the children that saw them, for it added to the fear that they themselves might go missing as well. The second reason was because the ads were over-exploiting stranger danger, when in all actuality, strangers only make up 1/100% of all child abductors. And the third reason was because the ads were disproportionately featuring white children, when the rate at which children of color went missing was much higher. Not long after the milk carton campaign, 9-year-old Amber Hagerman was attacked and abducted on her way home from her grandmother's house in 1996. Unfortunately, the little girl's body was found with her throat slashed 4 days later. While watching Amber's family walk through the nightmare of her death, a local mother, Diane Simone, came up with an idea: an alert system that would notify people of these abductions similarly to how they would be notified of the weather. This system was called America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response, or the Amber Alert System, named to honor the girl that hadn't been saved. However, even though the system was hailed as a great idea, it's not necessarily all it cracked up to be. The alerts themselves are particular. The abducted or missing child must meet certain requirements in order to have an Amber Alert announced for them. So if you walk into a police station saying that your child is gone, the agency has every right to tell you you're on your own. These alerts are so specific, only 200 of them are issued every year. 200 out of more than 460,000 entries for missing children in the FBI's National Crime Information Center. And not only does it have this issue, but the co-founder of the system herself, Dee Anderson, has stated they don't pay attention to it like they used to. And it's true, Amber Alerts aren't given the amount of attention they should be. And tons of Reddit users, including r/Ontario, who literally said, "Let me sleep, phone. Your Amber Alerts are a joke, and I don't even go outside," think that the notification is just a waste of time. This is largely because of our growing use of social media, and although this isn't the most reliable source of information, it's the source we see the most. Speaking of the most, let's talk about the people that get the least amount of attention through social media. Now, we've all seen or heard of the case of Gabby Petito, a 22-year-old influencer who went missing at the end of August last year. Her story quickly overtook the nation's social media sites, and hashtag Gabby Petito was trending on Twitter for weeks. And that same thing has gotten over 959 million views on TikTok and over 20,000 individual posts on Instagram. She captivated every ounce of attention that the world could give her. But one thing was brought to light because of her story: the overlooked cases of Indigenous women and people of color. Now, I absolutely am not saying that Gabby should have received any less attention than she did. I'm simply trying to make the differences in attention clear, because those differences are huge. It was made public that nearly 700 Indigenous women had gone missing where Gabby Petito was found. And according to a report published by Wyoming's Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Task Force, only 11% of white people remain missing longer than 30 days. Whereas Indigenous people were about 100% more likely to still be missing after 30 days. And in light of Gabby's case, thousands have begun to fight back against this intolerance. Nicole Wagon, a 51-year-old mother, stated, "I advocate for justice, not just for my own daughters, but for the many families, because they have lives, they have stories, they aren't numbers. They are not just numbers. They're human, just like you and me. So it begs the question, why aren't they being treated like it?" And it's a good question. It really is. It just seems to be one that no one actually wants to answer. Their stories are silenced. This image has also been circulating on social media. The red handprint over the mouth has many meanings, but the original one is to represent the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement and represent the thousands of women that are being silenced. These voices are meant to be heard, not left in the shadows. Now there is the matter of answering that question. Why do some cases get more attention than others? The framing effect is a cognitive bias where a person prefers an option based on how that option is presented to them, in a negative light or a positive one. People of color are almost always framed under a negative light and are often portrayed as sex workers, drug addicts, and criminals. Whereas when a white person goes missing, they are automatically depicted as respected family and community members. There is also the matter of the attention itself. Deemed missing white woman syndrome. There's also the matter of the attention itself. Deemed missing white woman syndrome, when a teenage white girl goes missing, the public is made more aware of the situation. Whereas when a person of color drops off the face of the earth, it's a public consensus that they just ran off to fulfill their drug usage and life of crime. And I know how that sounds, but it's the truth. The way a person is framed in social media is a huge contributing factor to the attention put into their case. For example, 9-year-old white female Serenity Denard went missing February of 2019. When you look up Serenity's name, you get 8 full pages of Google filled with articles, stories, YouTube videos, and the involvement of police and volunteer work for 2 years. 9-year-old Indigenous male Satan Standing Soldier went missing May of 2018. When you look up Satan's name, you get his age, gender, and date of disappearance. That's it. And according to senior research scientist Emily Grant, white people were more likely to have an article out while they were still missing, as compared to Indigenous people, who were more likely to get the first media article on their case only after they were found deceased. In that case, we're only going to know about Satan when someone finds his body. We first looked at the timeline of how missing persons have been portrayed throughout history. Then, we discussed the disproportionate attention given to those missing persons cases before finally uncovering why that disproportionality exists. When I found my sister, something clicked. I realized that maybe what people say is true. Hold on while you still can, because you never know when they're going to be ripped away from you. So I hugged her like my life depended on it. And yeah, I bought her that stupid Kinder Joy.